Hey YouTube, and welcome to my channel. So, I recently tried to explain World of Warcraft to someone and I realized that it's quite difficult. While I could explain that it was a massive multiplayer online role-playing game, I had a hard time trying to captivate the grandness of it all and to clearly present all the aspects of the game without also showing it. In this video I will try to explain what exactly is World of Warcraft 2020 edition. I will talk about the world, the continents, the factions, the inhabitants of the world, the classes, and I will tie in some story and basic gameplay as well. I will also briefly touch base on pending changes that we know will come in 2020. Before we get started, I want to make it clear that this is an introduction to the world of Warcraft. It is not a guide on how to play the game. In my opinion, that is something you should experience firsthand. So while I cover a lot about the game, I will not make any recommendations on how you should experience it. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's start off with a little history. Our story begins on a world called Azeroth. Azeroth is a planet in a vast universe known only as the Great Dark Beyond. A description of the creation of this universe and all the cosmological forces is given in the book Chronicle Volume 1, but it basically boils down to this. Before there was anything, there was only light and shadow. The ever-increasing tension between these cosmic forces caused a series of catastrophic explosions, the Big Bang if you will. This Big Bang also brought to life several beings, such as elementals of fire, water, earth and air, beings of holy light called Naru, and, perhaps most importantly, the colossal Titans. The spirits of these Titans form deep within the cores of several planets. These spirits are called world souls. A world soul sleeps in a planet until it is mature, and then the world wakes up as a Titan. We could spend hours talking about the creation of the Great Dark Beyond and the Titans alone. For this video, all you need to know is that the Titans eventually found the planet Azeroth, and within this planet, a sleeping Titan, or as I just mentioned, a world soul. The Titans then started to terraform the planet to their image, which eventually resulted in the creation of life. Some other stuff that you should know about the World of Warcraft universe? There is a dark force in the cosmos known as Void Lords. Affiliated with these Void Lords are the Old Gods, who could best be described as cosmic horrors of darkness. And they have a lot of tentacles. The purpose of these dark entities is to enslave a world soul/Titan. Old Gods are also present on Azeroth. One of them, Y'Shaarj, was actually killed by the Titans, and his death severely damaged the world. The three others whose existence we know of were imprisoned. Two of them, Cthulhu and Yogg-Saron, tried to break free from their prisons and their manifestations were defeated by us, the players. Currently, at the date of this video, we are battling against the old god N'Zoth after he was released from his Titan prison. One of the Titans, Sargeras, encountered a random world corrupted by the old gods. Out of fear over them ever succeeding in enslaving a world soul/Titan, Sargeras destroyed the entire world and then recruited a ton of demons to form the Burning Legion, and they started the so-called Burning Crusade, the purpose of which was to destroy all world souls to prevent them from ever being corrupted by the Void Lords. Their primary target, Azeroth. However, at present, Sargeras is not really a threat as he was imprisoned at the end of the Legion expansion back in 2018. But enough history of the universe. Let's talk about Azeroth, the world of Warcraft. But first, we should address the faction divide in the world. The primary races of Azeroth are divided amongst two factions, the Horde and the Alliance. At one time in Azeroth's past, the Horde was a force of evil and the Alliance were the good guys. However, in today's Azeroth, such distinction has completely faded. Neither faction can be regarded as either good or evil. Now, throughout the storylines of Warcraft, the factions may sometimes even enter into an armistice or something that may resemble peace, but sooner or later someone does something that pisses off the other side and it's war once again. The majority of your adventures will take place on Azeroth, and the planet is divided in several continents. Each continent has a different mix of inhabitants. For now, I will only briefly name the most notable inhabitants of the world. I will discuss the playable races in more detail later in this video. To the west is the land of Kalimdor. The land's main inhabitants include Night Elves, Orcs, Trolls, Tauren and Goblins, but also Centaur, Quilboar and the Qiraji. In addition, some of the islands in the northeast of the continent are also inhabited by the Draenei. The Horde capital of Orgrimmar is located near the central eastern coast of Kalimdor. Off the northwestern coast, you could once find the homeland of the Night Elves, Teldrassil, and their capital Darnassus, but they were burned down by Sylvanas Windrunner during the recent War of Thorns. In the most southwestern part of Kalimdor, you can find the ruins of Ahn'Qiraj, which served as a prison for the old god Cthulhu. On the eastern side of the planet, there are the Eastern Kingdoms, made up of three regions. The former kingdom of Lordaeron, now home to the undead, the dwarven realm of Khaz-Modan in the center of the continent, and to the south the region of Azeroth, bearing the same name as the planet, which is where you'll find the human kingdom of Stormwind and its surrounding regions. And also, this is the location of the Alliance capital of Stormwind, located in the Elwyn Forest along the western coast of the continent. It could be argued that the Eastern Kingdoms are actually made up out of 4 regions, as in the far north you can also find the elven lands of Quel'Thalas. The Eastern Kingdoms as a whole are primarily inhabited by humans, dwarves, undead and blood elves, but also worgen and gnomes. On a side note with respect to Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms, in 2010 a global catastrophic event known as the Cataclysm occurred. The large black dragon Deathwing broke loose from within Azeroth through the earthen crust, leaving chaos in its wake. The Cataclysm transformed the zones in Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms as we knew them. This means that a lot of zones used to be very different compared to the post-Cataclysm zones currently in the game. In the north, you'll find the frozen lands of Northrend, home of the Vrykul, Taunka, Tuskar, Nerubians and the Dragonflights. Northrend also houses a Titan facility named Ulduar, which served as a prison for the old god Yogg-Saron. Northrend is also the location of the Frozen Throne. What is that, you might ask? Well, a long time ago, the Prince of Lordaeron, Arthas Menethil, fell to madness after seeing his kingdom suffer from the plague, a disease killing the infected and turning them into mindless undead. This army of undead was called the Scourge. In pursuit of a demon from the Burning Legion who were behind the plague, Arthas traveled to Northrend, where he found the cursed runeblade Frostmourne, and eventually he obtained the power to command the undead Scourge. Long story short, he became a Death Knight of the undead army and later ascended the Frozen Throne to become the Lich King. Later he would be defeated by the players and succeeded by a human named Bolvar Fordragon, who will have a big role to play in 2020. To the south you'll find the island of Pandaria, a land greatly inspired by Chinese architecture and environments. Pandaria is home to the Pandaren, the Yangol, Jinju, Hosen and Mantid. An ancient evil also lurks in Pandaria in the form of the Shah, manifestations of negative emotions such as anger, pride and fear. The Shah spawned from the essence of the old god Yasharaj, after the Titans had killed him. The still beating heart of Yasharaj slept under the land of Pandaria until the now former warchief of the Horde, Garrosh Hellscream, excavated it and tried to consume and harness the power of the old god. This resulted in a siege on the Horde capital of Orgrimmar, where we, the players, stopped Garrosh and his conquest for power. In the center of the map we can find 3 large islands, the Broken Isles, Kultiras and Zandalar. The Broken Isles are primarily inhabited by elves, High Mountain Tauren, Vrykul and Drogbar. Kultiras is the home of the Kultiran humans, and Zandalar is an ancient troll empire ruled over by the Zandalari trolls, and also inhabited by Volpera and Sethrak. Apart from Azeroth, our adventures have also taken us to different planets and dimensions. In the second expansion to World of Warcraft, The Burning Crusade, we traveled to Outland, the former homeworld of the Orcs, a broken and destroyed world, mainly the result of the Burning Legion visiting. We've also traveled back in time into an alternate reality version of the planet Draenor, the same world as Outland, but then before it got destroyed. We also visited the planet Argus, once the homeworld of the Draenei, now the world of the Burning Legion. And finally, in 2020, we will visit a different plane of existence, the Shadowlands, Realm of the Dead. I made a separate video on what we can expect from the Shadowlands, and I'll put a link in the description in case you want to know more about the Shadowlands. So now that we've covered the world, let's talk about the races, and more specifically, what races you can pick for your character and can play as. To put it very generally, the race determines what your character looks like. Worth noting, however, is that races are faction bound, so both factions have different playable races. When creating your character and picking your race, you are also picking a faction, except in one instance with a neutral race, but we'll get to that. Also note that some classes are not available to certain races. We'll get to classes in a bit, but for now, know that the class you pick determines how you play the game. Each race does come with some racial abilities, and in theory, some classes may benefit from certain racials more than others. But in my opinion, racial abilities only really matter if you play the game on top competitive or esport level. Since that is only a very limited amount of players, my advice would be to simply pick any race class combination that you like. So, there are 11 different core races, but also 8 allied races. And 2 additional allied races will be added on January 14th, 2020. Allied races are usually just reskins of a core race. As allied races are introduced and unlocked by playing the game, I will not discuss them here in great detail. Let's talk about the alliance races. The humans of Stormwind are a young race, and thus highly versatile, mastering the arts of combat, craftsmanship and magic with stunning efficiency. The humans' valor and optimism have led them to build some of the world's greatest kingdoms. The stoic dwarves of Ironforge spent countless generations mining treasures from deep within the earth. Once, the dwarves cared only for riches taken from the earthen depths. But then, records of the Titans surfaced, which said that the Titans were the initial creators of the dwarves, and that they had given them an enchanted birthright. Driven to learn more, the dwarves devoted themselves to the pursuit of lost artifacts and ancient knowledge. 10,000 years ago, the Night Elves founded a vast empire, but their reckless use of primal magic brought them to ruin. Recently, the former warchief of the Horde, Sylvanas Windrunner, burned down Teldrassil, the home of the Night Elves, consuming some of the Night Elves by vengeance. The small, eccentric, often brilliant gnomes are held as one of the most peculiar races of the world. They have an obsession for developing radical new technologies and constructing marvels of mind-bending engineering. The Draenei share a strong bond with the light. Driven from their homeworld of Argus, the Draenei spent years fleeing from the Burning Legion. One of their interstellar ships crashed on Azeroth. The lucky few who made it to Azeroth found a home in the Alliance. Gilneas was once a human kingdom. But the humans of Gilneas were hit with a dark curse, turning those affected into beasts that walk upright as men but hunt and howl as wolves. As their lands were threatened by the undead, the Worgen joined the Alliance. Now let's talk about the Horde races. The Orcs originate from the planet Draenor. Although they were peaceful people with shamanic beliefs, they were once enslaved by the Burning Legion and sent through the Dark Portal to wage war on Azeroth. Although it took many years, the Orcs finally escaped the demon's corruption and won their freedom. The Orcs are an honorable race, holding honor in high regard. Originally, the undead were part of the Scourge army controlled by the Lich King. One group of undead freed themselves from the Scourge in a small period of time when the Lich King lost some of his power. These renegades call themselves the Forsaken. They fight a constant battle to retain their freedom from the Scourge, and to exterminate those who would hunt them as monsters. The Tauren strive to preserve the balance of nature and heed the will of their goddess, the Earth Mother. Once, the Tauren were attacked by Centaur, and they would have been wiped out. However, with the help of the Orcs, they managed to defeat the Centaur. To honor this blood debt, the Tauren joined the Horde. Once at home in the jungles of Stranglethorn Vale, the fierce trolls of the Darkspear tribe were pushed out by warring factions. Eventually, the trolls befriended the Orcish Horde. Though they cling to their shadowy heritage, the Darkspear trolls hold a place of honor in the Horde. Long ago, the majestic High Elves created the golden city of Quel'Thalas, built around a magical fount of energy known as the Sunwell. When the Lich King destroyed their capital long ago, the survivors turned to the Horde for help. Now known as Blood Elves, these refugees are all that remain of their glorious civilization. Originally the slaves of jungle trolls on the island of Kazan, the Goblin race was forced to mine ore out of a volcano. However, by crafting their own powerful artifacts of engineering and alchemy in secret, the Goblins managed to overthrow their oppressors. The Goblins' natural greed soon lifted them to prominence as masters of mercantilism. Finally, there's a sort of neutral race called Pandaren. They start off as neutral, but they have to choose whether they want to join the Horde or Alliance later on in the game. Pandaren originate from Pandaria, but the most adventurous of the Pandaren come from the Wandering Isle, a mysterious land on a gigantic sea turtle, cut off from the rest of Azeroth and Pandaria itself. The noble history of the Pandaren stretches back thousands of years, well before the empires of man. Now, let's talk about classes. Your class determines your playstyle and how you experience the game. Each class has different abilities, attacks and spells, as well as different specializations, and each class is supposed to feel unique in some way. When playing with other players, different classes may assume different roles. First, there is the role of tank. Tanks are defenders of the group. Basically, all foes should attack the tank so that the other group members do not get killed. Second, there is the role of healer. This is probably self-explanatory, but a healer replenishes the health of the tank and the other allies if they get damaged in combat. Finally, there are the DPS classes. DPS stands for damage per second, and the abbreviation DPS is used to indicate the role of damage dealer. DPS can be distinguished in ranged, dealing damage from afar, and melee, close-quartered combat. While the tank holds the attention of the enemy and the healer heals any incoming damage, the DPS must take down the enemies with their attacks. Note that not all classes have a tanking or healing specialization, while all classes have at least one DPS specialization. Each class also has a talent tree. Every few levels you will unlock a new talent for your character. These talents are either new abilities for your class or passive effects to give you a boost in combat. Warrior is one of the most popular classes. They can tank and DPS. For as long as war has raged, heroes from every race have aimed to master the art of battle. Warriors combine strength, leadership and vast knowledge of arms and armor to wreak havoc in glorious combat. Paladins may perform all three roles: tanking, healing and DPS. Paladins are warriors of the holy light. They are paragons of justice. This is the call of the paladin: to protect the weak, to bring justice to the unjust, and to vanquish evil from the darkest corners of the world. Hunters are a DPS class, both from a distance and in melee range. From an early age, the call of the wild draws some adventurers from the comfort of their homes into the unforgiving primal world outside. Those who endure become hunters. A cool feature for Hunter is that you can tame a beast as a pet to fight or even tank for you in combat, while you knock arrows or fire a gun from afar. Rogues are a melee DPS class. Free from the constraints of a conscience, these mercenaries rely on brutal and efficient tactics. Rogues sneak about the battlefield, hiding from enemies and delivering surprise attacks to the unwary when opportunity arises. By skillfully wielding dual-wielded weapons, rogues can deliver catastrophic damage to their targets. Priests can act as both healer and ranged DPS. Priests are devoted to the spiritual and express their unwavering faith by serving the people. For millennia they have left behind the confines of their temples and the comfort of their shrines so they can support their allies in war-torn lands. In the midst of terrible conflict, no hero questions the value of the priestly orders. Experienced priests carefully balance the use of their offensive powers when tasked with keeping their party alive. Shaman can assume the role of healer and DPS, both ranged and melee. Shaman are spiritual guides and practitioners of the very elements. Unlike some other mystics, Shaman commune with forces that are not strictly benevolent. Acting as moderators among earth, fire, water and air, Shamans summon totems that focus the elements to support the shaman's allies or punish those who threaten them. Mage is a pure ranged DPS class. Student gifted with a keen intellect and unwavering discipline may walk the path of the mage. The arcane, fire and ice magic available to magi is both great and dangerous, and thus revealed only to the most devoted practitioners. Mages possess the ability to transport themselves and their allies between cities and can summon replenishing food and water. Warlocks are also pure range DPS. In the face of demonic power, most heroes see death. Warlocks see only opportunity. Dominance is their aim, and they have found a path to it in the dark arts. These spellcasters can summon a demon as minion to fight beside them. At first, they command only the service of imps, but as a warlock's knowledge grows, stronger demons join the dark sorcerer's ranks to wreak havoc on anyone who stands in their master's way. Just like paladins, monks may assume the role of tank, healer and melee DPS. When the Pandaren was subjugated by the Mogul Empire centuries ago, it was the monks that brought hope to the seemingly dim future. Restricted from using weapons, these Pandaren instead focused on harnessing their chi and learning weaponless combat. When the opportunity for revolution struck, they were well trained to fight off the oppression. Similar to paladins and monks, druids may perform all three roles: tanking, healing and DPS. Druids harness the vast power of nature to preserve balance and protect life. With experience, druids can unleash nature's raw energy against their enemies, raining celestial fury on them from a great distance, binding them with enchanted vines or ensnaring them in unrelenting cyclones. A druid's primary characteristic is that they can shapeshift into a variety of animals. Changing forms let them assume different roles. They can also shapeshift to travel faster on land, in the water or in the air. Death Knights may play as tank or melee DPS. When the Lich King's control of his Death Knights was broken, his former champions sought revenge for the horrors committed under his command. After their vengeance was won, the Death Knights found themselves without a cause and without a home. One by one they trickled into the land of the living in search of a new purpose. Demon Hunters may also play as tank or melee DPS. Demon Hunters uphold a dark legacy, one that frightens their allies and enemies alike. They embrace fell and chaotic magics, energies that have long threatened the world of Azeroth, believing them necessary to challenge the Burning Legion. Wielding the powers of demons they've slain, they develop demonic features that incite revulsion and dread in fellow elves. A cool extra feature for demon hunters is that they can double jump and have wings that allow them to soar through the sky. So now that we know where our adventure takes place and what our characters might look like, let's talk about what we're doing. Basically, there are two distinct parts to the game: leveling up your character and the end game. Your first goal is to level up your character to the max level. You level up by filling an experience bar. Experience is primarily gained by killing monsters or completing quests. You can also run dungeons while leveling up. Dungeons are designed for groups of 5 players and you will face mighty enemies to obtain powerful rewards. When WoW first came out, the max level was 60 and was increased with every expansion up to 120, the level cap at the time of this video. As 120 levels could be considered to be too much, the number of levels will be squished in 2020. All 120 characters will be scaled down to level 50 and the new level cap will be 60 in the next expansion. This does not mean that it is currently pointless to level up a character all the way to 120. On the contrary, the level squish will only change the number that indicates your level. Your power will remain the same, so no need to fear that you will lose all progress. But I digress. Once you hit max level, the endgame begins. The endgame activities may differ per expansion or patch, but some aspects will always be present. I will not discuss the expansion and patch specific stuff, as these will change once the new expansion and its patches arrive. The aspects that are always present are dungeons and raids. Dungeons can be set to two different max level difficulty settings, heroic and mythic, the latter being more challenging. The Mythic Plus feature allows you to run dungeons on ever increasing difficulty levels on a timer that must be beaten. WoW is famous for its raids. A raid is similar to a dungeon, only now designed for between 10 to 30 players to complete. The goal of the raid is to defeat complex fights against a variety of bosses. For Mythic difficulty, raids require 20 players in order to even stand a chance against the raid bosses. Mythic difficulty is so challenging that often only about 1% of the players complete it while it is considered current content. A completely different aspect of the game is PvP, player versus player. Players of the opposing factions cannot play together nor communicate. They are sworn enemies. Most interaction between the factions takes place in PvP, where players from the opposing factions try to defeat each other. You may encounter players of the opposing factions on your adventures throughout the world. If you have War Mode enabled, chances are this will result in a brawl. You will only be safe in your faction-controlled zones and the so-called sanctuaries. And if you want to avoid this altogether, you can simply not enable War Mode or turn it off later to prevent any open world PvP. As WoW is an online game, you will interact with other people. Players can bond together in a guild. A guild is basically a player association. Guilds are formed to form a social atmosphere in which to enjoy the game and to make grouping and raiding easier and more rewarding. Guild members are the people you interact with most in the game and who may even become good friends. And finally, I want to quickly mention Classic WoW. Classic is similar in some aspects, but also very different to everything covered in this video. The world is limited to Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms, and most zones look different, as they were not altered by the Cataclysm. Quests are more scarce, leveling up is slower, and monsters are tougher to kill. Classic also lacks a bunch of quality of life improvements added in later expansions. The game is slower paced, but also a lot of fun to play. Although the intention of this video was never to give you a complete overview of all the ins and outs of World of Warcraft, I do hope that I have given you a general answer to the question, what is World of Warcraft? We could spend another few hours talking about the game, but I think I've kept you busy for long enough now. If you have any feedback or questions, please leave a comment below. I would be very grateful if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos on all things Warcraft. My name is Katu, and I hope to see you next time.